Scottish politics now, Leo. We've left this one for you. This is the war of words between the forces of good and evil, Sturgeon versus Rowling.
Yeah, so Nicola Sturgeon could be forced to water down her gender law changes to quell rebellion within the ranks of her party, the SNP. So she's at COP27 pretending she's an important world leader at the moment, but she's looking at an amendment which would make it more difficult for under-18s to change their gender, change their sex after a row with J.K. Rowling and protests outside Holyrood. So the SNP were going to change the law. So, young teenage boys and girls in Scotland could just, self-identify. The route to changing gender, changing sex would be much easier. So there's been a lot of backlash against this. So the first reading of the bill sparked the largest rebellion of the SNP era, with Ash Regan, one of the ministers, resigning, 6 other MSPs voting against the government and 2 more abstaining. And it's kicked off. I mean, Scotland's really a one-party state. There's no viable opposition. So, they've been able to steamroll through this legislation. But really, it's terrible legislation. It needs to be looked at. It needs to be, if not watered down, then just scrapped entirely. Because we don't need to be making it easier for children to be changing their gender. I mean, once people are old enough to make informed decisions and have informed consent. But the Sandifer Clinic in Glasgow, which is the child gender clinic, they have been putting children as young as 9 on puberty blockers. And a 9-year-old, I'm sorry, but, a 9-year-old isn't in...
Even a 16-year-old, 9 out of 10 of these children later naturally just grow into their normal sex.
And would this legislation make it easier for those children to then... This is about their sort of formal identification on a document. Would it then make it easier for them? Is that the assumption to them seek surgery?
Yeah, bring thresholds down to younger ages.
You just have to live as the opposite sex, and you don't even need a psychiatrist or anything.
Or a certificate or anything. And we're seeing this with... in Scotland, there's sex criminals going to women... Male sex criminals going to women's jails. I mean, there's a huge incentive for them to do it, because obviously they can carry on offending, the toilets are cleaner, but also they get to change their identity. So, if you go from being called Fred to being called Karen, anybody Googling your name isn't going to see the crimes that you're associated with.
It's interesting you mentioned the single-party state, effectively, in Scotland, because the obvious sort of precursor of that would be the Soviet state, and they, too, had a lot of wishful thinking in there. There was, I don't know if you heard Lysenko, he was their famous, he's the sort of state biologist who had these ideas about how you could enhance the crop yield and so on that were absolutely absurd, but they weren't subject to, they virtually demanded by diktat that the wheat become more productive. He would, cut it down. And it was a sort of really fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of hereditary qualities or characteristics. As if you cut the grass will then, its children will be shorter. Anyway, it just suddenly struck me a similar sort of mindset.